Nobody can tell you what is best for you. You are the expert of yourself. When people actually give themselves permission, now you're in a place of free choice. And then you can check in with yourself and say, how hungry am I? What do I actually want to eat? How much of that is going to be satisfying? And then you are able to eat in a way that's in response to your body. If people felt like they were eating the ice cream and that it was bad for them and they shouldn't have so much and all of this stuff, then there was this contraction that didn't, and the body almost like didn't take in as much of the nutrients as someone who was saying like, this is so enjoyable. I love ice cream. Ice cream is such a fun food that I get to have sometimes. And it has some great nutrients that are, coming from the dairy, and like, this is going to be fine. And I'm going to move on.
Welcome to Present Potential. I'm your host, Hassan, and the reason I launched this podcast is to create a ripple effect of optimism that reaches 1 billion people in the next decade. Ambitious? Very. Scary? A little bit. The aim of Present Potential is to empower listeners by sharing stories of individuals who've turned challenges into opportunities, proving that we all have untapped potential. If you're new to this podcast, welcome. If you've tuned in before, thank you for your support, and I hope you find value in these conversations. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening from wherever you're tuning in. Welcome to Present Potential. I'm your host, Hassan, and I'm so grateful and thankful for you for joining us, for listening, for tuning in, for the comments, messages, and for really engaging with us. It's such a privilege to be a host and to also listen to the inspiring stories of everyone that has come on and to learn from their wisdom. Today, we have a guest, and I'm going to be speaking with Julia Hampton. Julia is a nutrition expert. She's also a former social worker, and she really focuses now on mind, body, and spirit well-being, and she guides her clients in that. Throughout her journey, she really focused on being supportive to people, and later she ran a local market. And I think that's where it sparked her interest in what she actually does. And if you go through her website and her description, she calls herself um, uh, a recovering perfectionist and people pleaser. I can definitely relate to the second part of that. And now Julia inspires others to embrace self-acceptance and vitality by challenging diet, culture, and compassion. And I'm so excited to dive deep into this conversation because I'm sure that I'm going to learn so much about like diet and the things that maybe I'm still not doing right. So without further ado, Julia, welcome to Present Potential.
Thank you so much for having me. Glad to be here.
Great. So maybe we could start from the beginning. Tell us a little bit about you. Who is Julia?
Oh, I am still on the process of discovering her myself. Isn't that what we're here to do on this earth? To learn and to grow and to discover who we truly are in relationship with everyone else. Yeah, so who am I? I'm a nature lover. I'm a wife. I'm a sister and a daughter. I'm a good friend to people. I'm a volunteer. I'm someone who loves cooking and who loves animals, especially my cat Baxter. Um, and yeah, there's so many different things that we can sort of pull out, all of these different identifiers that then help other people feel connected to us. But I think that my whole life I've been on this journey of really connecting with that spirit part of myself as well. And so that question of like, who am I, always kind of delves deep into, that spiritual spark inside of myself as well, that doesn't have words to define it.
I love that. I can completely resonate as well because you're saying just rediscovering and understanding and that spark that really intrigued you to see who you are and describing who we are. It sounds like a just a basic question, but then it really unlayers different layers of who we are. And just touching on that, like how did you get into that phase or state where you were starting to understand who you are and rediscovering and finding the things? What kind of situation, experience, something that you went through that kind of really illuminated that for you?
Hmm. Well, I think that it's one of those things where, when we're little kids, we kind of know we don't need to, we're just living without all of the identifiers and we're just our most natural expression of ourselves. And it's all the layering of culture and experiences that start getting in the way. And so when I was born in Colorado, out in the mountains, in this little town, Guffey, Colorado, and so I had this sort of little utopia of my family and nature and my animals, and then we moved when I was around 6, so like that starting in school age, and my whole entire life changed. And
Mhm.
so that was really a defining moment for me, as this move to New England and going to school. So now I was like surrounded by this like very defined structure and all of these people, adults and kids, with all of these different expectations placed on me. And then, the stressors that were happening in my own family in that whole process. And so a lot of the things that as an adult I've still been like unlayering are, I can still kind of harken back to some of those pivotal moments of those shifts where um I realized I needed to fit into a box to survive and that kind of thing. And then that um as I've matured, all of these different experiences where I've I went out on my own after college and began to really deconstruct things that I had learned growing up and started to kind of find my own way. And so um yeah, there's so many defining moments. It's hard to pick one, but I think that it's just like you said, that delayering of like all of, it's like we're we're totally pure and innocent, then we get all this layering on us, and then we have this whole process of delayering and rediscovering ourselves, and it just seems like the arc of life, and that we're on the journey we're on.
Keeps us interested in finding out what's taking place. And
Yes.
I'm curious as well, like if you can remember, how was it when you moved from Colorado to New England and you were in a different place and environment and trying to adjust to that whole new place? What was it like? If you can remember, like what you were experiencing, new people, new teachers, new school.
Hmm.
I'd love to hear some of that.
Yeah. um I yeah, it was like I said, kind of going from this not a lot of stimulation, not a lot of different people, to like a very concentrated. We still lived in a little town, but like I just remember being in a classroom and it being like noisy and sort of the energy of so many different people. And I'm a very sensitive and intuitive person. And so, my antennas are always out, like feeling out what's going on, and I can really sense what's going on with different people. So I think that it was just very overwhelming for my system. And then I also had a learning disability, so I had dyslexia. And so then learning, fitting into this learning model was also hard. So then I was pulled out, which was kind of a godsend to get some special help and to be in a room with less people. But then that also set me apart as different. And so that, it socially, it just was challenging. Like I felt awkward in general and very overstimulated. And then I also wanted to fit in, but then didn't totally feel like I did because of this learning disability and not always being in the classroom. And so kind of that um that struggle with like fitting into what's happening, but then also needing that special help and a different type of environment for myself, but also being a little kid and not knowing how to
Yeah.
voice that or navigate it, and recognizing how I developed strengths, right, from those challenging experiences of um, making friends with the adults in the room, advocating myself for myself in that way, relying on my intelligence and my ability to gauge people and know who was safe and who wasn't. And also to become, a natural thing for me was to become a mediator between people and
Yeah.
to be a peacemaker. And so finding that role within kind of that cultural community of peers and social dynamics were strengths that ended up coming out of that
Wow. Sounds
experience.
like there's a lot that took place, and especially as a 6-year-old, like navigating through all of
Yeah.
these changes. And how did you know that you were dyslexic? What was there like a some sort of test, or you were just trying to understand different, I don't know, books or lessons that you were going through, or what
Mm-hmm,
was
mm-hmm.
something that really helped you understand that? And then how did you find it out? And then how did you
Yeah.
navigate it as well?
Yeah. Well, my mom, she did some homeschooling with my sister. And so she started to try to teach me to read. And she was realizing that like I wasn't getting it and she didn't know
Mm,
why. Like there was something different about the way that I was processing the information that seemed easier to do with my sister. And so she sort of backed off, right? Like she didn't want to mess it up because what she knew to do wasn't working. And
mhm,
so I don't know whether she advocated for me to get a test because
mm,
she had already seen some differences, or if just starting school and their process of seeing what I was doing and what I was able to do and not able to do. But I think that I was specifically tested. And I'm very grateful that I was in school at a time where they understood that and they had testing and then they had people that knew how to work with it. So I have a lot of gratitude for the support and help that I got so early on because I think that that really helped to um, it helped me to learn reading and writing in a way that worked with who I was and how my brain worked. But it still follows me today. It's not like my brain was fixed, quote unquote, right? Like I still have that way that my brain functions, but the understanding that I have about it gives me the ability to give myself some more grace, explain to other people why I come across, like why I get certain things mixed up and that kind of thing. But growing up, I had a lot of anxiety about reading out loud in class because my reading wasn't necessarily as smooth as other people's. I'm like a horrible speller because I try to do it phonetically and I, like I's, E's, A's, I don't know. Like so even
all of
now
us.
it's like I love the fact that there's the spell check that lets you know because yes, I have very creative spelling. And then in high school and preparing for college, like because I read pretty slowly because my brain has to work harder to navigate all of those letters and everything. I advocated for myself to get special help with kind of learning how to speed read a little bit and gain some confidence in being able to take in more information because I knew that I was going to be going to college where a lot more was going to be asked of me. And so because I understood this about myself, there were different touch points, and even now where I can advocate or explain or just understand myself and then give myself that grace. So
Yeah, it sounds like having so much self-awareness of what it is, and then advocating a way for you to be able to go through the different stages of life from school to college. And it's so great to have someone as well, like your mother, just noticing these things. And then
mm-hmm,
at a time where this type of um, learning disability wasn't really something that would restrict you from being involved or being part
mm-hmm.
of like the school and growing up. And I can only imagine how tough it must be like reading out loud. I still find it really difficult to reading out loud. And I don't know if I'm dyslexic. I've never been tested, but it's just so challenging. And I love how you said it's you spell creatively because it's a way that it's just expressing yourself in a creative manner. It's not right or wrong. It's
Right.
just how you express
Right.
yourself. I love that. What a way to frame it. Okay, and then so that was your upbringing, and it sounds like you've already had really strong self-awareness of what it is that you have and like the environment. What did you want to become when you went to college? What really inspired you, and what did you want to go into in as a career or so?
Hmm. Yeah, when I was in, I alluded to the fact that I found this mediating role early on, and that kind of followed me. And when I got into high school, I became interested in psychology, and I really leaned into excelling in my academics. And so I, took an AP psychology class, and and I also in high school got trained as a peer mediator. So I was gaining some actual skills around that, and really finding that I had a natural ability, but then it was also, that whole ability to master a skill and then see how it's helping other people was really fulfilling to me. And so I did some informational interviews with people that were in the psychology field as well as social work. And I decided to go to school for social work because it felt like I could get a really solid education and then get into the workforce. Like I wanted to be like doing stuff to help people, not just in school for the rest of my life. And so it felt like social work was the much more sort of practical, hands-on way to do that. And and so I chose a school that had a rigorous program, and went to start off in that direction, really thinking that I was going to be, a case manager, sitting down with individuals on a daily basis, working through challenges. And then at the end of my schooling, because social work really helps you understand, the person as an individual, but then how they're affected by their family environment, their community environment, their town and state environment, their national, and how like we're always couched inside of all of these different contexts, and that all of these different contexts then have an impact on that individual. And so in one of my last classes, which was much more around like social justice and social policy, so really looking at more of that kind of government and cultural level of things. And I just had this aha moment about how, like, whoa, if you could work on this bigger level and have this trickle down effect where some of the systems and some of the environment and some of the oppressive things that hold people down and make everything more challenging for them, if you could change things on that level, then you're like making this a bigger ripple effect potentially. So I got
Yeah.
really curious about that, but it was like a totally new way of framing things for myself and really redefining what I thought I might want to do. And so I dipped my toe into it through doing an AmeriCorps, which is like a more volunteer, experience based, rather than like jumping in to get a full time job. And that led me to where I live now in Vermont. And I worked on that community level around youth issues for a number of years.
Wow. And during that stage, was there someone that you were looking up to that you felt inspired and wanted to follow in their steps, or someone who guided you and thought that maybe you should try this? Because when you said that you just wanted to dip your toes to test it, to see if this is something that you wanted to do after being curious and having that aha moment, it sounds it sounds so innovative because
Mm.
there's a small step that you take before really jumping in. And I'm just curious to hear if there was someone that helped you during that stage in your life.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question because like as you're asking it, I'm like, no. Like I enjoyed all of my professors, so it wasn't even like I wanted to be like this one professor or I heard this one story about somebody. I think that it's a testament to this way that I look inside myself, and I feel into what feels true and what feels like the next right step for me. And um and it just the ideas I was getting from that class like resonated in a different way than all of the other things. And and then this idea of doing an AmeriCorps year just felt so clear and right. And so I just moved towards that. And then, I tried to get a position that was like, out on the West Coast, like far away from home, and really, like make my way on my own in a city. And the universe brought me to little southern Vermont. And even though it was still close to home and like still another small town, I, I was still following, a an intuition, and then the universe brought me to the place exactly where I needed to be, because it really became my chosen home as an adult. And no matter if I go away for a little portion of time, I keep coming back to this place because there's something about the people and this town and the land that just feels like home, like I found my place. So
Amazing. Great. And then eventually, like, so you tried that and you went to the West Coast, eventually came back, the universe was calling you and you had something there. How did you eventually end up going into nutrition and going into that really detailed aspect? Because like when I was reading about you and your website and seeing what you do, it sounds so simple how you explain it. It's refreshing as well because there's so many different diets and so many people talking about food and what's good for us and what's not good for us and leaky gut and I'm not an expert in any of these, but like how did you eventually go into this field?
yeah. So it's very linked to my own personal journey with food and my
Mhm.
body. And, a thread through all of this, like I talked earlier about how we get all of this cultural conditioning upon ourselves, and then we spend this most of our adult life trying to delayer it. And so a lot of the conditioning that I got as a person in a female body was around body image and what you're supposed to look like to be okay and to be healthy and that kind of thing. And so um, and so much of my life I was trying to control my body in some way, but also had this complex relationship with food because food plays many roles in our lives. It's not just fuel. It's part of
Mhm.
celebrations. It's part of connection with other people. It's a part of emotional regulation. And so I've alluded to the fact that I was a kind of anxious child and not really knowing how to deal with that in this new environment, being home alone after school, the snacks that you could have and that sort of thing became part of the comfort and the way that I regulated myself after feeling so dysregulated at school. And so um, this complex relationship of like food is my friend, but then I'm supposed to control it and limit it, and especially the things that I really like because they're people are telling me that's what's like changing my body, and that my body shouldn't change in this way, and it shouldn't look like this, it should look like somebody else.
Yeah.
And so that like push and pull relationship that I had with food just kept kind of following me. And then in um as an adult, later in my adult life, getting to a place where I was just naturally eating a little differently and being active because I got into a relationship with my now wife, who's very active and she loved cooking. And I just started feeling better in general. And I wasn't on a specific diet. I was actually in a really good place of like, not specifically dieting, but just loving life, like this moment in time that I wasn't in that trap of dieting. And I just naturally started feeling better. And it kind of like, it wasn't just the enjoyment of the relationship. I could see that there was like a multiple factors going on. And so that sort of piqued my interest. And I started, researching more about nutrition just on my own, like you alluded to, all of the different books out there. And I was cooking in a market and deli that my wife owned at the time. So I was getting just like more of that hands-on enjoyment of like being with food and being in connection with other people around food. And And then my wife actually was diagnosed with breast cancer and went through treatment. She's totally fine now and in remission for like many years, over 10 years. So, but during that time, when she was going through treatments, we wanted to learn how to support her while she was going through these treatments, and nutrition was one of the things that we started to research. And so getting some resources about how nutrition can be really healing, and it was, again, like I said, about being just feeling that tug and that resonance around social work and that AmeriCorps opportunity. That same sort of tug started happening with like, I'm just like naturally super interested in it. I could read all of these books completely on my own time. Like there's obviously something here. And I could, and in my own process with that, I just started getting more and more confused, right? Like, because you start reading one book and it's telling you you should be vegan and like not eat any fat, and then you go to another book and it's telling you to eat like all animal products and high fat diet. And so it's just sort of like, oh my God, this is like so confusing because each author has all of this science and this technological way of explaining to you why, so you can get completely wrapped up in it and like think that it's the way and go down that route. And I tried it all. Reading the books, I tried it all. And even when I felt like I was at my most like eating the healthiest, like my cycle went away, and there were indicators in my female body that were telling me that like things were out of whack. Like I was going to an extreme place that wasn't healthy. So then this whole idea of like, well, then what is health? If like looking this way and eating this way is not producing this healthy outcome, now I'm even more confused. And so because I was passionate about it, because I still wanted to help people, and because I was like confused and wanted to understand, I decided that I wanted to get a master's in nutrition to really be able to answer a lot of these questions for myself. Like, how do you look at all of this research and then be able to say, understand it, and then be able to say, well, what is right for me? And how do I help other people answer that question for themselves? And so I loved getting into the science, which I never saw myself as a sciencey person, but because of loving this topic and having this goal of helping people around it, I got really into it. But the science piece and the intricacies of nutrition are fascinating. But like at the same time, being on my own journey with this relationship with food and recognizing that all of this information wasn't necessarily helping me completely change these behaviors that were frustrating around food is where I found, on my own research, not part of my master's, it's like a whole nother thing you have to do on your own, learned about intuitive eating and found a lot of mentors around that, and did a certificate program, and really delved into that. Like, how do you help people get back in touch with themselves and their own body and begin to start trusting their own intuitive wisdom around what's right for them, even around this idea of food, so that because we're each individuals, each of our bodies is unique, and all of these studies are extrapolating from a subset of people who may not even have the same kind of lifestyle or gender or genetic makeup that you have. And so you can't necessarily apply all of those things to you. Nobody can tell you what is best for you. You are the expert of yourself. And so I really specialize in how to work with people to trust that they are the expert of themselves, and then learn how to listen to themselves and respond to themselves and be in that place of learning and experimenting in order to find what really works for them, and to be in their own autonomy around that. Because so much of the way that we have received information about health and nutrition is like, there's somebody out there that knows, and you should be doing all of these things. And that whole dynamic is what keeps people in a cycle of not trusting themselves and feeling like they need to restrict, but then always end up rebelling because that is the part of us that is trying to take our power back. So understanding all of that and being able to work with people in that dynamic way is what I do now.
That sounds so fascinating. And to start out with, like, I'm so glad that your wife is okay and in remission for
Thank
many
you.
years. So really happy for
Yeah,
that.
thank you.
And is it okay to go a little bit deeper as well in terms of what you've already explained, which is really fascinating to me because you mentioned how society says we should look at a certain body and think of it in a certain way, and it's that body image. And I loved how you connected relationship as well to food because like it is a relationship, and if we love food so much, then why can't we just eat all the time and eat the things that we love? And we might think that we love them, but then they're actually impacting us. And I've recently, actually in the New Year's, um, I have suits from 10 or 15 years ago, and they've started not to fit me anymore. I'm really frustrated about that. Even though like I work out, I look at my diet and I try to eat healthy food based on my own perceptions of what healthy is, because it's so confusing with all the foods that's there. And in the beginning of the year, I decided to go 7 days without eating any carbs. And well, not any carbs, but I decided just to eat meats, chicken, meat, eggs, fish, vegetables, fruits, and even some pulses. But that's it. And it's such a broad range of nutrition. And I felt so angry most of the time because I love bread and it's everywhere. And I saw some changes in my body, but I'd love to go a little bit deeper if it's okay with you in terms of like that approach and how to understand your own body and how to do it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that I sort of chuckle, but in a very I know what that feels like to like you feel like you're choosing something of your own volition, but then there's like this anger and this frustration and this like push and pull inside yourself about this diet that you've decided that you want to try, right? So you think you're doing it for good reasons, but then you're in this struggle with yourself. Um and so much of that has to do with the fact that the change is from a place of, first of all, like I need to fix myself.
Mhm.
So anytime we are in that place of thinking that we need to fix ourselves, then it means that something's wrong. And so it's
Mm.
coming from a place of fear, like something's wrong. And in order to get away from what doesn't feel right or all of the maybe health concerns or whatever the looming fears are, I'm going to run to this plan to see
Yeah.
if somebody else has information, because I obviously can't trust myself because I'm the one who got myself here, and so I
Mhm.
need someone else to tell me what to do. And so as soon as we sort of give away our autonomy to this outside idea of what we should be doing,
Yeah.
we start creating this push pull, right? Because we really want to be having autonomy. Like that's part of the whole development of us as human beings, is to build your own autonomy. And so
Yeah.
essentially we get into with our relationship with ourself like a parent and a teenager,
It's so true.
right? And then we have biology as well. So whether you are restricting calories or just have the thought in your head that you can't have bread, this
Yeah.
idea of restriction, our brain our brain is like, we can come up with all of these complex ideas, right? But the way that our system, like nervous system, responds to um fear and restriction just out of this like survival mechanism. And so it's going to revert to like, all it hears when we say we can't have bread, we can't have all of these different things because they're bad, that part of ourselves, um, nervous system and regulation part and survival part, just hears famine and fear.
Yeah.
Things are not safe and we don't have enough resources. And so biologically starts turning on things that helps to conserve energy, so slows our metabolism down, and then also puts out our antennas to be aware of food, especially these foods that are in short supply, so that as soon as they're in our environment, we will eat as much as possible, because we think that they're in short supply. So there's these like automatic systems that get turned on in our biology in reaction to the fact that we've created this idea of restriction.
Yeah.
And so then biologically, as well as this like adolescent rebel part of us starts to come out. And eventually we say, screw it, I want the piece of bread. I want toast this morning, or I'm out with people at a restaurant and I'm gonna get the waffle. And we rebel against these artificial rules that we've placed upon ourselves, really
Yeah.
from this place of like reclaiming our autonomy from this like external pressures and in response to this biological drive. And
Yeah.
then we have judgmental thoughts about ourselves related to that. We feel guilty, we get down on ourselves. Why can't I control myself? We feel like we're a bad human being and that there must be something wrong with us. And now we're back at the beginning of the
Yeah.
cycle. That means that
Exactly.
we must need a new plan and we just keep going round and round and round.
Exactly. It's like you just summarized the whole diet trials that I've gone through my entire life. And I didn't know that it impacts our biology that much. So even just having that thought of restricting ourselves creates that fear of a possible famine. And then so our body starts conserving certain types
Mm-hmm.
of breakdowns of nutrition because we might starve, or like our body thinks that it's going to be starving. Um, how much of our thoughts impacts the way that our body behaves? Because it's something that I've been thinking about, and I was talking to my wife, and she was telling me her grandmother at some point never ate any sweets. And funny enough, I don't eat sweets, but I don't crave it. But her grandmother used to just really eat herself inside because she wants to eat sweets, but never did. And if she does, she would tell people a bit bigger piece. No, no, a bigger piece. So, how much do our thoughts really impact the way that our body behaves to the external circumstances or nutrition that goes into our bellies?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, our thoughts impact a lot. There's a lot more research about how the gut brain axis. So like if your the way that we're thinking impacts our digestion and all of the nerve endings in our digestive tract. And then we get so much information from our digestion that then impacts our brain. But if we have fear thoughts about our food and our brain, then it's sending signals to our gut to like contract and to be fearful. And so then we may be having digestive issues like cramping or bloating, indigestion, that sort of thing. And it can be connected to a fear or not being in a calm place when we're eating our food.
Yeah.
And they've actually done studies where one particular study where they measured the amount of nutrients that people pulled from their food and really just changed how people were thinking about it. So like if people felt like they were eating the ice cream and that it was bad for them and they shouldn't have so much and all of this stuff, then there was
Yeah.
this contraction that didn't and the body almost like didn't take in as much of the nutrients as someone
Oh,
who was
wow.
saying like this is so enjoyable. I love ice cream. Ice cream's such a fun food that I get to have sometimes, and it has some great nutrients that are, coming from the dairy, and like this is going to be fine, and I'm going to move on. And then your digestion is like, oh, this is a happy place, and we're okay, and there's nothing to be afraid of, and this is, safe food that we need to pull from what we need. And so we're giving our whole system these messages because the
Yeah.
way that we're thinking about something impacts our hormones, our nervous system, and starts shifting all of the different regulations within our body. So, one of the other things that I've become some training in and work with my clients around is the nervous system regulation because it
Mhm.
has such a huge impact, like I was just describing, on digestion itself. And so much of that, I was also trained in cognitive behavioral coaching because it's all about like what you're thinking impacts how you're feeling, what your emotions are, and then that impacts how you're acting. So much of um, especially things around dieting and nutrition and change your lifestyle is all about actions. Like, well, you should just be doing all of these things over here. That's the wrong paradigm, because you can't
Mhm.
change your actions without changing your thoughts. You can change your actions short term by
Yeah.
will and by sheer like determination. But if you don't change the underlying thought processes and feelings that are
Yeah.
driving the habits that you have, or those protective coping mechanisms, then you're not going to change the behavior long term. And so what I do with people is get down to that like thinking and feeling, and like we have to look at why you think you need to be fixed. Like if we
Yeah.
don't get to those underlying beliefs and start shifting the way that you actually feel about yourself and your body, then your actions aren't necessarily going to change long term. And what we see in the research around the methods that I use is that when people actually and there's some information in like self-compassion research and that kind of thing, when people actually like themselves and
Yeah.
trust themselves and believe in themselves, they naturally take action that supports themselves. And so this whole idea of like hating yourself into being a better person
Yeah.
doesn't work. It just creates suffering.
Yeah. Sounds like it's not gonna last. And it's so true what you're saying. I I saw research done on mindsets, and um the way that they tested it, it was done by Dr. Alia Crum, and she has a TED Talk on YouTube. It's amazing how the body works, because she offered two groups of people. Sorry, the first group of people who came, a milkshake, and the milkshake had 0 calories, and it was basically no sugar, and it's fat free, and it's good for you. And she measured people's ghrelin level, which is the chemical that looks at how hungry we are. And then
Mm-hmm.
she invited the same group again, and she told them, this time I'm going to give you a milkshake that is full of fats, double chocolate, it's full of sugar, it's sprinkled with really horrible things, tasty, but maybe horrible. And she measured the ghrelin as well. And the research shows like it was exactly the same milkshake. And the only difference between that experiment was the way that she described what the milkshake was. And what happened was the body's response was, the first time, ghrelin dropped a little bit less than the second time. So the body already started to anticipate that it's not going to be a very heavy milkshake, so I'll still be a little bit hungry. While the second time, ghrelin really dropped because it satisfied the need of the body to consume those fats. And what you described as well, it sounds like it's similar in that way, the way that we think of food and the intention of even eating the meals that we have. And it's really fascinating because it starts with us. So it's not follow this diet or just cut out
Mm-hmm.
carbs or reduce your
Mm-hmm.
calorie intake, but it's the way that you really believe yourself in terms of what you want to eat. So having that non-judgmental approach to foods that you eat really impact the way that you eat. So
Right.
if that were the first thing that I would consider, sorry, you were gonna say something, and I just,
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, what you're saying is some of the two key things, like permission, right? I'm
yeah,
allowed to eat any food, which is actually true. You're an adult. You can go out and buy any food, right? So you're just being more honest with yourself. I have permission to eat any food. When people actually give themselves permission, now you're in a place of free choice. And then you can check in with yourself and say, how hungry am I? What do I actually want to eat? How much of that is going to be satisfying? And then you're able to eat in a way that's in response to your body. When we overeat and when we think that, oh my God, if I start, I'll never be able to stop, that's the
mm,
reactive eating. That's that the rebel coming out, or that part of us that's like opportunistic, like what
yeah,
I was describing about when we think there's a famine, the natural reaction is then if the thing is available, we're going to eat as much as possible.
yeah,
And so it's just when we don't trust ourselves, it's because we've been in these reactionary patterns that feel out of control because we haven't been in our autonomy around food. And so it starts with giving ourselves permission, neutralizing food, taking away
Mm,
those judgments, taking away all of that, like, oh, this is terrible for you, or this is healthy, unhealthy, good, bad, and just saying, food is food. This is
yeah.
food in front of me. I have permission to eat any food. And so really sometimes that takes time to really identify, like, why is it carbs that you thought were bad that you needed to not have, what is it about bread and what have you heard? And sometimes we have to like disentangle all of those thoughts about it so that we can feel more neutral about it and really practice this neutral observational language around it. But when we don't have a charge on food and it's just neutral, we've given
Mm,
ourselves permission and we learn how to be more in touch with our body and what the signals that it's giving us and how the feedback that it gives us around food, then it's like easy. It's easy
yeah.
to eat. It's easy to make choices in any type of situation, and we feel better in our body because of how we're thinking about things, but also that we're making choices that work for us instead of trying to follow some sort of
Yeah.
plan, hoping that our
Love that.
body will behave.
So starting with permission and then having that non-judgment in the terms of what food we consume. And it's so true because like why carbs and why other things. And from your research and the things that you've come across, uh, how how important is it to stick to a certain routine? Because like what I've seen in terms of like our circadian rhythm as well, it's so important for us to have a specific time that we sleep definitely is one of the most important parts of how we can be at our full energy and performing. But then also food, because like what I've read is if we eat food, let's say today morning, if I woke up and I had breakfast at 9, my body tomorrow will be adjusting an hour or two before 9 a.m. to start releasing chemicals that will digest the food at 9 a.m. How important is it to have that consistency in terms of the timing that we consume food?
Yeah, so I would answer that question individually with each person, right? Because like
Yeah,
I
definitely.
said, part of my, my what I learned and the way that I learned about who we are in that social work lens of like the
Yeah.
context that I was talking about before applies to each individual person that and the choices that we make around food. And so what I talk with people about more so is what is the context around the decision that you made around that food and helping people to become more aware in the moment of all the complexities that are influencing their choice, right? So if and then with that investigation, with that broader awareness, then we can make choices that work with our rhythm. And for
Yeah.
some people, it is really important to work first, to eat first thing, and to have a schedule because of the way that their body works and the cues that they're getting from their body. Some people have a different, maybe like a really good blood sugar regulation naturally, and they don't have to pay attention to that as much, but they have figured out that making sure that they eat at certain intervals is really helpful. But everything is in the context of life, right? So there's some, I have a client right now where she has two different jobs. One job is from 11 to 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. and the other job is like a 9, like I think she has to be there at 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. or something like that. So she has these like telling her that she needs to eat at specific intervals and start her every day the same is adding a stressor to her rather
So
than
true.
helping her to listen into herself and to set herself up for success in these days with when she has this varying schedule. And so
Wow.
it's not, I don't find it helpful at all to like have these set ideas of what we should be doing and what the optimal thing is isn't always helpful because oftentimes, especially for people who have been in a chronic dieting cycle, any kind of information about like you should be doing it this way just creates another stressor and a place where they feel like they're failing. And so
Yeah.
my work is with working with people that need to rebuild that trust with themselves, that they're going to know and they're going to develop their own rhythm and they're going to be able to trust themselves to respond to what they need in whatever varying context. Because we can't always control so many things in our life, but we can begin to trust ourselves that no matter what the situation, we're going to show up for ourselves and we're going to listen and respond to what we need.
Exactly. That's so great. It's amazing to hear that because like there's no one size that fits all and everyone is different depending where they are in terms of like their career, their life, their engagements with other people, the projects that they're working on, the traveling, the place that they live in, the droughts, the famine, like it all
Yeah.
really depends. And
Yeah.
what I'm hearing is it's so important to have that mindset and approach to what the food is and to just give yourself that permission. Such a valuable takeaway for me because it's so important the way that we see the food. And if even growing up, like I used to always, well, we were conditioned and also taught that we should be very grateful for the food. And before we have
Mm-hmm.
any meal, we really express gratitude. And I never thought about that. And I thought that, yeah, I'm really thankful because other people don't have food. But now I'm beginning to learn that actually it's that relationship that you mentioned and just being grateful that
Mm-hmm.
this is going to nourish my body and I'm going to feel so great and it's connecting to what your company's name is as well, like so
Yeah.
it's
Nourishing
all
vitality.
linking
Yes.
together. It's so fascinating. Like there's such a
Yeah.
different aspect of how we can live our lives and what to do. And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
so great hearing as well, like from your point of view of what's really important. And you're not just saying,
Yeah.
this is the schedule, this is what you follow, and you'll see the difference.
Right.
Take a step back and see
Yeah.
what else is
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. 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 I love that what you said about gratitude and taking that minute. And the gratitude might be that you like in terms of thinking about your context, the gratitude might be that you're eating this meal in community with someone that you care about, that you're like breaking that
Yeah.
bread and sharing that moment. It might be helping you link to the connection you have with so many different other humans and life beings and how that interconnection, right? And thinking about
Yeah.
all of the people and animals and resources that went into making that food available for you right then. And so, taking that time to acknowledge those things, it might be gratitude for the way that going out to a restaurant or the way that you prepared the meal and the different colors and the way that it's tantalizing all of your different senses, because we know that the way that things smell and the way that it's visually put on the plate and our appreciation of the intricacies of the way that it's connecting with our senses is part of what turns on our digestion. And so, yeah, you can really play with that gratitude and deepen that relationship that you have with food and the place that it holds in your life um, by taking that minute before you eat.
Yeah, and it's reminding me as well of like having that mindfulness to any
Yeah.
meal because like what you described, like looking at that plate and how the food is on that plate and then the smell and really
Mm-hmm.
savoring the tastes and enjoying that meal. It's just developing that relationship even deeper and connecting it with the
Mm-hmm.
food. Such a
Mm-hmm.
great way to see it
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
most of the time, and especially like when I was in the corporate world, never really thought about what I was eating. Like it was just I have half an hour. So
Right. Check it
just
off the list. Right. And that's a good point. Like, yes, this mindfulness around food is like this beautiful thing. And yet we eat so many times during a day, during our lifetime, that it's not to place the expectation that every single time is going to be this like amazing experience is unrealistic and not helpful, right? So sometimes there is practical eating, right? You're thinking ahead. I'm not super hungry now, but I know I have an hour and a half of errands and I don't want to like get hungry in the middle of that, so I'm going to eat this thing now. Or I'm at work and I've got a meeting coming up and I have a half an hour and I need to read something while I'm eating to be prepared for that. Like those
yeah,
things happen. And so not even setting ourselves up to like eating needs to look like this mindful, beautiful experience every time. But
yeah,
when we're conscious and giving ourselves permission and aware of like okay, this is a practical eating time. Now I'm home and I'm with my family and I want to cultivate this mindful experience and I have time and space to do that. And so, like, giving ourselves grace to
So
allow
true.
all of those different experiences.
Absolutely. Just taking that time, that permission, and being flexible as well. Like it sounds to me as if it's so important to acknowledge and adapt to the different situations.
Exactly.
It's so valuable. Like, thank you for sharing that with us. And is there something that maybe I didn't ask or we didn't get into that you'd like to share with us? Because like I feel I could ask you so many questions about food.
Right.
But
No, we
you'll
could talk about this for. No, I feel like we've really been able to delve into some of the key pieces that I talk with people, and it's been great to for you to be honest about your experience and share a little
yeah,
bit of that because I'm sure a lot of people will resonate, especially this January time of year where a lot of people are
absolutely.
like trying to have done the similar thing that you have with trying to get
Exactly.
into a
And like
diet.
my mother-in-law and my family were tracking as well. So they would call me after 5 days, like, how are you feeling? Have you lost weight? Should we try it as well? I'm like, I don't know why I'm doing it, but at the end it just became a commitment to
Yeah.
myself that I said I'm gonna do this. So I just
Hmm.
stuck with it. But
Yeah.
it's so true. I hope it resonates with
Yeah.
people.
And so the thing that I would say, whether you feel committed to continuing or not, the thing to do if you're feeling that push pull within yourself is to remind yourself, like, I'm experimenting, like
Yeah,
I'm seeing what's going to happen with this, and if I take a learning approach to it instead of a success failure approach, then
yeah,
that can be in turn like a similar to that permission, the magic of permission, the magic of saying like I'm just learning from this and it's an experiment versus I have to do this perfectly and have this specific outcome or have a failure, right? It can like change the quality of it completely. So no matter where you are with whatever resolution goal that you put out there in the world, like if you want to do one little switch, then just focus on what you're learning from it versus that success failure.
absolutely. And it's that grace that you mentioned more than once. It's so true. Um, Thank you so much. And
Yeah,
um, if people have questions or they'd like to reach out to you, like what would be the best way? Where can they
yeah.
go to read more or connect?
Yeah. Going on my website, nourish-vitality.com is the best place. People can sign up to get my free guide to how to feel in control of your eating, which is around trusting yourself around food. And it has a quiz where you can figure out what type of eater you are. And then there's detailed description about how to use my approach to dial in on the specific eating challenges that you face, and that gets you on my my email list. And then you can also read more about me and connect you. I'm open for like a free 15-minute call with anybody who's curious. But I also have like an introductory assessment that I do with everybody. And so that it has like a few different steps that people can take to just dip their toes into the process
Yeah.
and see what they can learn from it before committing to any kind of long-term work with me. So yeah, my website
Great.
would be the best place. People can also friend me on Facebook and I'm also on LinkedIn.
Amazing. And we'll add the links as well to the description so people can click
Great.
on it and go and check them out.
Yeah,
Julia, thank you so much. And before
absolutely.
we go, we have a tradition on Present Potential where we get to ask the guests to share with us a words of wisdom that have helped them during challenging times. What is some motto or like some quote or any words that you usually go back to or reflect that help you to overcome obstacles or challenges that you sometimes might come against?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, the thing that always comes up for me is just when the caterpillar thought its life was over, it turned into a butterfly. So
I
that
love
just always speaks to me like when we think everything is at a
Yeah,
loss, maybe some beautiful flourishing thing is going to rise up from it, and that's
absolutely.
happened more than once for me in my life, and so I have to keep reminding myself of that.
That's so powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Thank you for all
Yeah,
the wisdom and insights. I feel like I've gained so much value from just listening to you. I
fantastic.
really appreciate your time and energy.
Good. My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you.
Great. Thank you to all of you who have joined. And as always, remember that today is the most important day of your life. Thank you for watching and listening to Present Potential. If you found value in this episode, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more. Join the conversation in the comments and let us know your biggest takeaway. If you'd like to listen to other inspiring stories, check out our other episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Make sure to also follow us on Instagram under Present Potential Podcast, where you get to see behind the scenes and engage with us.